My girlfriend wanted to break up because she listened to her friends more than herself. They kept telling her she could find someone better. But when she realized no one else would take her, she came running back begging. Hey Reddit, I'm a 27-year-old guy, and my ex-fiancée Madison just dropped the most ridiculous bomb on me out of nowhere. We had been planning our future together for years, and I genuinely thought we were building something real and solid between us. When she decided to end things, I respected her choice and walked out of her life completely. A few months later, I had to undergo some dangerous surgery that could have changed everything for me. That's when Madison actually had the audacity to visit me in the hospital, demanding my help and wanting to get back together. Here's the whole story of what went down and how it all unfolded. I had been with Madison, who's 26, for a total of 6 years. We had been engaged for the last 8 months of our relationship, and everything seemed to be going perfectly. I work as a certified welder at a local fabrication shop, where I make good money doing steady work. I actually build things that matter and last, which has always given me a real sense of purpose and satisfaction. Madison works at a high-end salon downtown, one of those places that charges absolutely crazy money for haircuts and caters to wealthy clientele. Madison is genuinely attractive. Really attractive, actually. She's the kind of woman who gets double takes when she's walking through grocery stores and gets offered free drinks at bars that she doesn't even want. I'm just a regular guy who knows his way around a MIG torch and can fix most things that break around the house. I'm not ugly by any means, but I'm definitely not model material either. We work together as a couple because we fit together in all the ways that actually mattered. We had the same values, similar goals, and we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. We first met during our senior year of high school when she was actually dating Derek Mitchell, the quarterback who had peaked in high school and thought his jersey number made him something special. I was the shop class guy who actually knew how to fix her beat-up car when it died in the school parking lot one afternoon. Derek was too busy worrying about his hair getting messed up and was way too cool to get his hands dirty with actual work. It took me about 20 minutes to diagnose that she had a bad alternator, and I spent another hour that weekend replacing it for her. I only charged her for the cost of the parts because I was just trying to help out. That's exactly how our relationship started. She would text me whenever something broke around her place, and I would fix it for her. We would talk while I worked on whatever needed repair, and she would laugh at my jokes and stories. Just like that, we clicked in a way that felt completely natural and effortless. The engagement happened last September during a camping trip that I had been planning for months. It was just the two of us, sitting around a campfire under the stars, and I presented her with the ring I had been saving for since March. It was a beautiful 2-carat diamond set in white gold that had cost me 12 weeks of overtime pay, but it was worth every single hour when I saw the expression on her face. We set our wedding date for November of the following year, which gave us plenty of time to save up money and plan everything properly without feeling rushed. My best friend Brandon was the first person I called after Madison said yes to my proposal. Brandon is the best mechanic in town and has absolutely zero filter when it comes to giving relationship advice, which I've always appreciated about him. "About damn time," he said when I told him about the engagement. "I was starting to think you were going to propose to your welding torch instead of Madison." For months afterward, everything felt completely solid and secure between us. We found our venue and booked our photographer well in advance. We started talking seriously about different honeymoon destinations, and Madison would show me pictures of wedding dresses she liked online. I would pretend to have strong opinions about flower arrangements and centerpiece designs, even though I honestly didn't care much about those details. Everything was progressing smoothly and staying right on track. The first crack in our relationship appeared this past February when Madison started attending a new fitness class downtown. It was some trendy Pilates place that cost more per month than most people spend on their entire grocery budget. She had been wanting to get more serious about fitness after the holidays, and I supported her decision completely because I knew that health and wellness were important to her. The problem wasn't actually the fitness class itself. The problem was the women she met there and started becoming friends with. Madison would come home with detailed stories about her new workout friends and their lifestyles. There was Nicole, who was married to a corporate lawyer and drove a BMW and had just gotten back from an expensive vacation in the Bahamas. Then there was Victoria, who was dating a cardiologist and was actively shopping for engagement rings in some crazy expensive price range. Finally, there was Camilla, who had recently gotten divorced and was receiving huge monthly spousal support payments while exploring her options with different men around town. At first, these were just random stories that Madison would share with me during dinner, or while we were relaxing in the evening. Madison would mention how Nicole had bought some ridiculously expensive purse without even thinking twice about the cost, or how Victoria's boyfriend had surprised her with a spontaneous weekend getaway to Napa Valley. I would listen to these stories, make appropriate comments, and didn't think much of any of it at the time. Looking back now, that was definitely the wrong move on my part. The tone of these stories started changing around late March. Instead of just casually mentioning what these women did with their time and money, Madison started adding her own commentary and observations to these stories. She would tell me how Nicole thought it was cute that Madison was getting married so young, or how Victoria couldn't understand why Madison would want to settle down when she had so many other options available to her. She also mentioned how Camilla kept insisting that Madison was wasting her prime years by committing to just one guy when she could be experiencing so much more. The first time Madison repeated one of these comments to me directly, I kept my response simple and straightforward. These women don't really know us or our relationship, I told her. What matters is what we want for ourselves and our future together. She agreed with me and promised that she wouldn't let their opinions and judgments get to her or influence our relationship. But the comments kept coming from her new friends, and they kept getting more specific and pointed as time went on. April was when things started getting really weird between us. Madison began making small criticisms about stuff that had never bothered her before in our entire relationship. She would point out that my work clothes were really dirty when I picked her up from the salon and asked if I could maybe change before we went out to dinner together. She mentioned that my truck was kind of loud and old and wondered if I had thought about getting something newer and more refined. She also started suggesting that maybe I should consider expanding my career goals, since we were getting married soon and all. None of these were actual fights or aggressive confrontations. Madison wasn't being mean or hostile about any of it, but each comment felt like a tiny test, like she was checking to see how I would react to her suggestions. She called them suggestions for improvement, which made them sound helpful rather than critical. I kept my responses measured and calm throughout all of these conversations. I explained to her that my work clothes get dirty because I do actual physical work that matters, and that's just the nature of the job. I pointed out that my truck was completely paid off and extremely reliable, which meant we didn't have monthly payments to worry about. I also mentioned that my career goals actually included becoming a certified underwater welder, which would significantly increase my income within the next 2 years. Madison would always back down when I pushed back against her suggestions, but I could see her processing my responses differently than she had before. It was like she was comparing my answers to some external standard that I wasn't aware of. I had no idea what that standard was or where it was coming from at the time. The breaking point came in early May during what should have been a completely routine evening. We were supposed to meet her parents for dinner at their house. Just a casual Thursday family meal. Nothing formal or special. I had been working on a rush job all weekend, trying to finish some structural repairs on a warehouse before the Friday deadline. The work ran longer than expected, and I showed up at Madison's apartment about 20 minutes late, still wearing my work clothes with a small amount of metal dust on my hands. Madison took one look at me when I walked through her door, and her whole expression changed immediately. "Seriously? You're going to my parents' house looking like that?" she asked with genuine disbelief in her voice. I looked down at myself to see what she was talking about. I was wearing clean jeans and a work shirt with my company logo on it. I had on my steel-toed boots, and sure, there was a little bit of dust on my clothes, but nothing offensive or inappropriate for a casual family dinner. "I'm coming straight from work," I explained to her. "Your parents have seen me in work clothes before, and they've never had a problem with it." "That was different. This is dinner," she replied. "Can't you at least change into something nicer?" "Madison, I'm already 20 minutes late," I pointed out. "Your parents aren't going to care what I'm wearing to a casual family meal." She stood there for a full 30 seconds, just staring at me like I had said something in a completely foreign language. Then she grabbed her purse and headed for the door with obvious frustration. "Fine, but this is embarrassing," she said as we left. That word hit me differently than all of her previous comments had. She wasn't disappointed or frustrated with the situation. She was embarrassed. Like being seen with me was something she had to apologize for or explain to other people. The dinner itself was awkward as hell. Madison barely spoke during the entire meal and kept checking her phone like she had somewhere more important to be. She seemed distracted and uncomfortable the whole time. Her parents tried their best to include me in conversation about our upcoming wedding, but Madison kept giving short answers and trying to change the subject whenever they brought it up. When her dad asked me about my underwater welding certification program, she actually rolled her eyes like it was some kind of joke rather than a serious career advancement. On the drive back to her place, I tried to address what had happened during dinner. "You want to tell me what that was about back there?" I asked her directly. "Nothing, I'm just tired," she replied without looking at me. "Madison, you acted like you were ashamed to be there with me tonight," I said. "What's really going on?" "I wasn't ashamed," she insisted. I wish you'd made more effort with your appearance." "More effort to what? Be someone I'm not?" I asked. She didn't answer that question. She just stared out the window until we got to her apartment, and we didn't speak for the rest of the drive. The next day, I called Brandon to vent about the whole situation and get his perspective on what was happening. His response was typically blunt and to the point. "What's next? She going to be mad that your hands are too rough?" he asked sarcastically. "From building things that don't collapse?" May and June were like watching a slow-motion car crash happen right in front of me. Madison didn't suddenly become a completely different person overnight. The changes were gradual and almost subtle, but they were consistent enough that I could feel something fundamental shifting beneath us in our relationship. Her fitness class group became her primary social circle almost overnight. She would go to dinner with them twice a week, plus weekend brunches and shopping trips to expensive stores I'd never even heard of before. When I asked if I could meet these women who were taking up so much of her time and clearly having such a big influence on her thinking, she always had an excuse ready. They were busy, the timing wasn't right, maybe next time. But next time never actually happened. Meanwhile, Madison started declining invitations to hang out with our mutual friends and the people we had known for years. Game nights with my buddies became not really her thing anymore. Double dates with couples we had known and enjoyed spending time with for years suddenly felt too young for where she was in life. She also stopped coming to my company barbecues and family gatherings, claiming that work was too busy or that she had already made plans with her fitness friends. It was like she was systematically removing herself from every aspect of my life that didn't involve her new social circle. Brandon was the first person to call it out directly during a group hangout in late May. "Where's Madison tonight?" our friend Chris asked when he noticed she wasn't there. "Wine tasting with her fitness friends," I explained. Brandon looked up from his pool shot with a skeptical expression. "Again? What is this, the fourth weekend in a row?" he asked. "Either those women are alcoholics or Madison's training to become a sommelier." The criticism from Madison became more frequent and more pointed as the weeks went on. My apartment was pretty basic. Had I thought about upgrading to something nicer? My weekend clothes were very casual. Maybe I should invest in some nicer shirts for when we went out. My idea of a good date night was kind of routine. Dinner at a local restaurant followed by a movie, compared to what other couples were doing with their time. Each criticism came packaged with a suggestion for improvement, always framed as helpful advice rather than complaints about who I was as a person. Madison wasn't being outright mean about any of it, which somehow made it worse. She was treating me like a project that needed work rather than a partner she loved and accepted. I started paying closer attention to the specific language she was using in our conversations. Words like ambitious, sophisticated, and professional came up constantly, always in contrast to things about our life together. Other men were ambitious. I was comfortable where I was. Her new friends were sophisticated. Our old crowd was kind of immature. Her coworkers' boyfriends had professional careers. I had just a job. During one of our regular beer nights in June, I shared some of Madison's recent comments with Brandon to get his take on the situation. "Wait, hold up," Brandon said, nearly choking on his drink. "She said you have just a job." He looked at me with complete disbelief. "Dude, what does Nicole do again? Besides spend her husband's money on yoga pants?" Our sex life took a hit during this period, too. Madison became less interested and more distant, like her mind was somewhere else even when we were physically together. She started working longer hours at the salon and picking up extra clients on weekends. When I suggested that we should spend more time together and focus on our relationship, she would remind me how important it was for her to focus on her career and build her network and professional connections. In June, things escalated even further. Madison started making direct comparisons between me and other men in her life. Nicole's husband had just gotten a promotion at his law firm. Victoria's boyfriend was looking at houses in the expensive part of town. Camilla was dating a guy who owned his own business, drove a Tesla, and took her to fancy restaurants every weekend. "I'm not saying you should be like them," Madison would say after sharing these stories with me. "I'm just saying it's interesting how some people really go after what they want in life." I tried addressing this directly several times during this period. I asked her if she was unhappy with our relationship, if there was something specific she needed from me, or if we should consider postponing the wedding until we worked through whatever was happening between us. Each time she would deny that there was any problem, say that she loved me exactly as I was, and then follow up with another suggestion for how I could improve myself or our situation. My underwater welding certification became a constant topic of conversation. When was I starting the program? How much more money would I make once I was certified? Would I consider moving somewhere with more opportunities for that kind of work? She had actually done research on underwater welder salaries and was convinced that this was my ticket to reaching my full potential. The breaking point came in late June during what should have been a simple conversation about our wedding budget. We had been planning a nice but reasonable celebration that would cost about $18,000 total, split between our families and our own savings. It wasn't going to be fancy, but it definitely wasn't going to be cheap either. We had both been comfortable with this budget from the beginning. Madison brought up how Nicole's wedding had cost $75,000 and looked like something straight out of a magazine. She mentioned that Victoria was already planning a $55,000 engagement party, and how Camilla's divorce settlement meant she could afford whatever she wanted for her next wedding whenever that happened. "I'm not saying we need to spend that much," Madison said carefully. "But don't you think we should consider what we're actually capable of if we really tried and pushed ourselves?" "What do you mean by that?" I asked. "I mean, if you got serious about expanding your career options," she explained. "If I took on more high-end clients at the salon, maybe we could have the kind of wedding that actually represents who we want to be as a couple." "Who do we want to be, Madison?" I asked her directly. She couldn't answer that question in any concrete way. Instead, she showed me photos from Nicole's wedding on her phone. The venue, the flowers, the dress, the professional photographer. Everything looked expensive and over the top to me. "Don't you think this is beautiful?" she asked, scrolling through the pictures. "It's nice, but it's not us," I replied honestly. "How do you know what's us? Maybe we've been thinking too small about what we could achieve together," she said. It became clear to me that Madison wasn't just getting advice from her fitness class friends. She was getting a complete worldview overhaul. These women had somehow convinced her that settling down young meant missing out on opportunities, and that marrying someone with a blue-collar job meant accepting a limited future for herself. July was when I finally stopped trying to save something that was already dead. The final month of our relationship felt like living with a stranger who just happened to look like my fiancé. Madison would come home from fitness class or dinners with her new friends and immediately start scrolling through social media, showing me pictures of places she wanted to visit, restaurants she wanted to try, and experiences she wanted to have. All of them were expensive, and all of them required a lifestyle that we simply didn't have. "Look at this place in Aspen that Victoria went to," she would say, showing me her phone. "Isn't it amazing?" "It looks nice," I would reply. "We should plan a trip like this," she would continue. "Madison, that's a $600 a night resort," I would point out. "So? Other people our age manage to afford nice things like this," she would respond. These conversations became daily occurrences, and work became my refuge from the constant pressure and criticism. I had started my underwater welding certification program in early June, attending classes 3 nights a week after my regular shifts. The program was intense and demanding, covering technical diving, underwater cutting techniques, and safety protocols that could literally save your life when you're working 60 feet below the surface. I loved every minute of it because it was challenging and meaningful work. Madison had initially been supportive of the certification program, mainly because she had researched the salary potential and knew it would significantly increase my income. But as the program demanded more of my time and energy, she became resentful and critical of my commitment to it. She complained that I was always studying or too tired to go out with her and her friends, and that I wasn't prioritizing our relationship properly. The irony wasn't lost on me that she was spending 4 nights a week with her fitness friends and working extra hours to afford her new lifestyle. But my 3 nights of classes that would directly benefit our future together were somehow a problem. Brandon pointed out this obvious contradiction during one of our study sessions at his shop. "Let me understand this," he said. "She's mad that you're studying to make more money, which is exactly what she wants. But she's not mad about spending her own money on classes about how to breathe better while stretching. That makes perfect sense." In late July, things finally came to a head during what should have been a simple conversation about our shared calendar. Madison wanted to attend a wine tasting event with her friends, the same weekend we had planned to visit my parents. When I pointed out the scheduling conflict, she casually suggested that we reschedule the family visit instead. "It's not like we don't see your parents all the time," she said dismissively. Madison, we haven't seen them since Easter, I pointed out. We made these plans 2 months ago. I know, but this wine thing is important, she insisted. Important for what? I asked. For my career. These women know people in the beauty industry. Nicole's husband has connections at some major cosmetics companies, she explained. I stared at her for a moment, trying to process what she had just said. You're a hairstylist, not a cosmetics executive, I said. Maybe I could be, she replied. Maybe I'm thinking bigger than just cutting hair for the rest of my life. It became clear to me that Madison wasn't just dissatisfied with our relationship. She was dissatisfied with herself, with her choices, and with the life she had built before meeting her new friends. The wine tasting event became a symbol of everything that was wrong between us. Madison went to the wine tasting despite my pointing out how it conflicted with our family plans. She came home 3 hours late, slightly tipsy, and full of stories about the amazing people she had met there. You should have come with me, she said. You would have learned so much about what successful people actually do with their weekends. I was visiting my parents like we had planned, I reminded her. Right, but sometimes you have to choose between being comfortable and being ambitious, she replied. Brandon's reaction when I told him about this exchange was absolutely priceless. So drinking overpriced wine with strangers is ambitious, he said, but visiting the people who raised you is being comfortable. I'd love to see these women try to change a tire or balance a checkbook. Real ambitious stuff. August was decision time for our relationship. Madison had started making comments about postponing our wedding, not canceling it entirely, just pushing it back a year or two while we figured out our direction as a couple. She wanted time to make sure we were building the right foundation for our future together. I told her that we needed to make a decision one way or the other. We could either move forward with the wedding as planned, or we could call it off entirely. Why does it have to be all or nothing? She asked. Why can't we just take some time to grow as individuals? Because we're either building something together or we're not, Madison, I said firmly. There's no middle ground here. That's very black and white thinking, she responded. Yeah, it is, because commitment is black and white, I told her. Madison couldn't handle that level of directness from me. She had gotten used to having conversations where everything was negotiable, where every decision could be delayed or revised based on new information that might come up. We didn't fight about it, or have screaming matches or throw things at each other. We just slowly stopped functioning as a couple. Madison would make plans without consulting me first. I would focus on my work and my certification program. We would go days without having a real conversation, and weeks without talking about anything more significant than whose turn it was to pick up groceries. By early September, we were basically roommates who happened to be engaged. We would see each other for maybe an hour in the evening, make small talk about our days, and then go to bed at different times. The end came on a Tuesday night in mid-September. Madison had been at another dinner with her friends and came home around 10 p.m. I was studying for my final certification exam, spread out at the kitchen table with textbooks and practice tests covering every surface. She sat down across from me and just watched me work for about 10 minutes before finally speaking. Do you ever think about what our life is going to look like in 5 years? She asked. I looked up from my books and gave her my full attention. I think about it all the time, I said. What do you see when you imagine our future? She continued. I see us in a house with a workshop in the garage, maybe some kids running around, I said honestly. Good work that pays well and keeps me interested and challenged. Time with family and friends who actually matter to us. Building something that lasts and has real meaning. She nodded slowly like she was processing my answer. That sounds nice, but I don't think that's enough for me anymore, she said finally. What would be enough? I asked. I don't know yet. That's the problem, she admitted. Madison, you can't plan a marriage around hypothetical better options, I pointed out. I'm not talking about other people, she said. I'm talking about potential that I didn't know I had before. Potential to do what exactly? I asked. I think we should talk about taking a break, she said, avoiding my question entirely. There's no such thing as taking a break from an engagement, Madison, I told her directly. We're either getting married or we're not. Why does everything have to be so absolute with you? She asked, getting frustrated. Because that's how commitment works, I said. That conversation lasted another hour, covering the same ground we had been circling for weeks. Madison wanted flexibility, options, and time to explore her potential. I wanted a partner who was sure about choosing me, sure about building our life together, and sure about our future. We couldn't give each other what we wanted, so we had to end it. The actual breakup happened 3 days later on Friday evening in September. We had both had time to think about our Tuesday conversation, and neither of us had changed our positions on anything. Madison still wanted space to figure things out, and I still believed that being engaged meant we had already figured out the important stuff. Madison had spent those 3 days talking to her fitness friends about our relationship problems. When she came home Friday night, she had the confident air of someone who had received a lot of supportive advice about making a difficult but necessary decision. "I've been thinking about what we talked about," she said, like she was about to deliver a business presentation. "And I think we want different things right now." "What do I want that you don't want?" I asked her directly. "You want everything to stay exactly the same," she said. "You want to get married and have the same life we've always had, just with rings and a marriage certificate." "And what do you want?" I asked. "I want to grow. I want to challenge myself," she said with conviction. That was the most honest thing she had said to me in months. "All right then," I said simply. "Let's call it off." I think Madison expected more of a fight from me. More attempts to convince her to stay, more negotiations about terms and timelines. When I accepted her decision immediately, she seemed almost disappointed. "Just like that?" she asked. "Madison, you just told me you don't think you can grow as a person while married to me," I pointed out. "What exactly am I supposed to argue with?" "I didn't say it like that," she protested. "Yes, you did. You said you can't achieve what you're capable of achieving if we get married," I said. "Which means you think I'm holding you back." "I think the relationship is holding us both back," she clarified. "From what again?" I asked. She couldn't give me a specific answer to that question. Just vague references to potential and growth and possibilities she hadn't explored yet. The engagement ring came off without any drama. Madison pulled it off her finger and set it on the coffee table between us, like she was returning a library book. I picked it up and put it in my pocket without saying anything. "What about the wedding deposits?" she asked, shifting into practical mode. "I'll handle the cancellations. You can deal with your dress," I told her. "What about our friends?" she continued. "They're adults. They'll figure it out," I said. We spent the next hour working through the logistics of ending our relationship. Madison would stay in her apartment, and I would move my stuff out over the weekend. We would split up our shared possessions, though there wasn't much since we had never officially lived together. We decided to tell our families separately rather than making joint announcements. The whole conversation was remarkably civilized and businesslike. I packed my belongings that weekend while Madison was out with her friends. It didn't take long since I had always maintained my own apartment throughout our relationship. My clothes, some books, a few kitchen items I had brought over, and my tools that I kept in her garage. Everything fit in my truck in 2 trips. I left her keys on the kitchen counter along with a note thanking her for 6 years together and wishing her well in whatever she decided to do next. I didn't see the point in having a dramatic goodbye scene when we had already said everything that needed to be said. The hardest part was calling her parents to let them know what had happened. These people had been planning to become my in-laws for 8 months. I gave them the basics without getting into specific details. They were disappointed, but understanding about the situation. Her little sister Sophia took it harder than anyone else. She had been excited about being a bridesmaid and had already picked out her dress. I told her that sometimes adults realize they're not as compatible as they initially thought, and that it's better to figure that out before getting married rather than after. My own parents were actually relieved when I told them, which surprised me at first. They explained that they had been worried about Madison's attitude changes over the past few months. Apparently, I hadn't been hiding my frustration as well as I thought I had. Most of our mutual friends weren't shocked by the news either. A few of them mentioned that they had noticed Madison seemed different lately, more critical and less interested in group activities. The only real surprise was how quickly Madison moved on from our relationship. Within 2 weeks of our breakup, she was posting pictures from expensive restaurants and weekend trips with her fitness friends. Her social media presence completely changed almost overnight. There were fewer couple photos and family events, and more solo shots and group pictures with her new crowd. I stayed off social media entirely for the first month after we broke up. I didn't need to see constant updates about Madison's new life, or read explanations about why our relationship had ended. Brandon was the first person to check on me after the breakup. He showed up at my apartment with a case of beer and his trademark subtle approach to emotional support. "So Madison's finally free to explore her full potential," he said, cracking open a bottle. "I give it 3 months before she's texting you about how yoga class didn't prepare her for the real world." October through December was all about rebuilding my life as a single person and focusing on the goals I had set for myself before Madison decided that our relationship was holding her back from reaching her potential. I finished my underwater welding certification in early November, passing all the technical and practical exams on my first try. The program had been challenging and demanding, but I genuinely enjoyed the technical aspects and the problem-solving required for underwater repairs. Within a week of getting certified, I had 3 different job offers waiting for me. It turns out that underwater welding is extremely specialized work, and there aren't many people who are qualified to do it safely and effectively. I chose to work with a company that handles infrastructure repairs for bridges, dams, and offshore platforms across the Southeast. The money was exactly what I had hoped for, and then some. My first contract was a bridge inspection and repair project that paid $2,600 for a single weekend's work. Not bad at all for someone who supposedly wasn't ambitious enough for his ex-fiancée. I moved to a better apartment in December, a 2-bedroom place with garage space for my truck and equipment, plus a workshop area where I could work on side projects. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was comfortable and functional. I started saving for a down payment on a house, figuring I would be ready to buy something within 2 years at the rate I was earning. Work kept me busy and satisfied on multiple levels. My regular fabrication job provided steady income and interesting projects that I enjoyed. The underwater contracts were both challenging and extremely lucrative, and I was learning constantly, solving problems I had never encountered before, and building skills that very few people possessed. I also started hitting the gym consistently for the first time since high school. This wasn't because I was trying to prove anything to anyone. Underwater work requires serious physical conditioning, and I wanted to make sure I was in the best shape possible for the demands of the job. Dating wasn't a priority for me during this period, but I wasn't actively avoiding it either. I went out with a few women I met through friends or work connections. Nothing serious developed, just casual dinners and movies. It felt good to spend time with people who were interested in me as I was, rather than constantly trying to convince me to become someone else. Through mutual friends, I heard occasional updates about how Madison was doing. She was still working at the salon, but had started taking additional classes in some kind of advanced beauty technique. She was still hanging out with her fitness friends regularly, though apparently the group dynamics were getting complicated. Something about money issues and the women competing for attention from the same social circles. In December, I ran into Nicole at a coffee shop downtown. She was one of Madison's fitness friends, the lawyer's wife who drove the BMW and had just gotten back from the Bahamas. She recognized me and came over to say hello. "How are you doing?" "Madison mentioned that you guys had decided to take different paths," she said politely. "I'm doing well. Work's going great, staying busy," I replied. "That's good to hear. Madison said you were getting into some kind of specialized welding," she continued. "Underwater welding. I just finished my certification," I explained. Nicole looked genuinely interested in what I was telling her. "That sounds fascinating and probably very well paying," she said. "It's good work," I confirmed. "I bet it is. My husband has clients in the maritime industry," she said. "They're always complaining about how hard it is to find qualified underwater welders." We talked for a few more minutes about work and mutual acquaintances. Nicole was polite and seemed genuinely friendly, which made me wonder how much influence she had actually had on Madison's decision-making process. Maybe Madison had been hearing what she wanted to hear from these women, rather than getting the direct advice she claimed they were giving her. At the end of our conversation, Nicole said something that really stuck with me. "For what it's worth, I always thought you and Madison were good together," she said. "Sometimes people get restless and think the grass is greener somewhere else." January brought my first major underwater contract, a dam repair project that would take 3 weeks and pay more than I used to make in 6 months at my regular fabrication job. I loved every minute of it. The project team was small, just 5 guys total, and all of us were specialists in different aspects of underwater construction. We worked efficiently, trusted each other's expertise completely, and took genuine pride in solving problems that most people couldn't even understand, let alone fix. Between my regular work and the underwater contracts, I was making more money than I had ever imagined possible. I started thinking about buying a house earlier than I had originally planned. With my income trajectory and the money I had already saved, I could afford something pretty substantial. Brandon helped me look at houses during weekends in January. His commentary on my improved financial situation was typically understated and direct. "So you're making serious money doing something most people can't even pronounce," he said. "And Madison thinks you needed more ambition." I'm starting to think those fitness classes affected more than just her flexibility. February brought the headaches. At first, they were just occasional sharp pain behind my left eye, usually when I was working in awkward positions or dealing with particularly complex underwater repairs. I figured it was just occupational neck strain from wearing heavy diving equipment, or maybe eye strain from working in low visibility conditions. It could have been sinus issues from the constant pressure changes that come with underwater work. The headaches got more frequent through March and became significantly more intense. It wasn't constant pain, but sudden sharp episodes that would leave me dizzy and disoriented for several minutes at a time. I started keeping ibuprofen in my truck and taking breaks more often during long work sessions. The vision problem started in early April. At first, it only lasted a few seconds at a time, but the episodes became longer and more frequent as time went on. When I started having trouble focusing during precision welding work, I knew something was seriously wrong. You can't afford concentration lapses when you're working with cutting torches in confined spaces. That's how people get seriously injured or killed. I made an appointment with my regular doctor in late April. He asked about my symptoms and did some basic tests, then immediately referred me to a neurologist. That was my first indication that this wasn't just job-related stress or simple eye strain. The neurologist ordered a series of tests: MRI scans, blood work, and cognitive assessments. He was professional, but clearly concerned about what the initial scans were showing. He started asking detailed questions about my family medical history and whether I had experienced any head injuries in the past. While I was waiting for the test results, I tried to maintain my normal routines as much as possible. I kept working my regular fabrication jobs, but I turned down underwater contracts until I knew what was going on with my health. I couldn't risk having an episode while working underwater. That would be potentially fatal. Brandon was the one who drove me to get my test results. The seizure happened on a Saturday morning in early May. I was at Home Depot picking up materials for a side project when everything went completely sideways. One second, I was comparing prices on copper fittings, and the next second, I was on the ground with paramedics asking me basic questions that I couldn't answer. I don't remember the seizure itself, just the confusion afterward. The paramedics said that witnesses described about 90 seconds of convulsions before I gradually regained consciousness. Emergency room, more tests, more doctors with increasingly serious expressions on their faces. Finally, a neurosurgeon sat me down with the scan results that showed exactly why I had been having all these problems. Brain tumor, a glioma about the size of a walnut, located in the area that controlled vision and motor coordination. This explained the headaches, vision problems, and the seizure. Surgery was possible, but it would be complex and carry significant risks. Sometimes life throws you unexpected challenges, and you either handle them professionally or you don't. I chose to handle it professionally. The surgeon was optimistic about achieving complete removal of the tumor, but he was honest about the potential complications. Brain surgery isn't like fixing a welding error. You can't just grind out the bad section and start over. We scheduled the operation for the following Thursday, and I started preparing for what would likely be a long recovery period. My boss at the fabrication shop was incredibly supportive throughout the whole process. He held my position and coordinated with our insurance company to make sure I understood that my job would be there when I was ready to come back. The underwater welding company was equally accommodating. They knew that skilled people were rare in this field and weren't going anywhere. Word got around quickly in our small town about what was happening with me. Most of my friends started organizing visits and support for when I would be in the hospital and during recovery. My parents drove down from 2 states away to be there for the surgery. What I didn't expect at all was hearing from Madison. Brandon was with me when a nurse mentioned that someone named Madison had called the hospital asking about visiting hours. "Oh, hell no," Brandon said immediately. "She disappears for 8 months and now wants to show up because you're in the hospital? What's next? She going to bring flowers and an apology letter?" Madison showed up at the hospital on Monday, 3 days before my scheduled surgery. I was reviewing pre-operative instructions when she walked into my room looking like she had been crying, but with something desperate in her eyes that had nothing to do with genuine concern for my health. "I heard what happened. How are you feeling?" she asked. "I'm fine. Surgery's Thursday, then recovery," I replied simply. She sat down without being invited and started with what seemed like genuine small talk. She asked about the doctors, the procedure, and how my parents' visit was going. After about 10 minutes of carefully neutral conversation, she shifted to what felt like the real reason for her visit. "Listen, I know the timing isn't great," she said, "but I really need to talk to someone I trust about some serious problems I'm having." There it was. Not, "I'm sorry about your diagnosis," or "I'm here to support you," just, "I need something from you." "You should leave," I told her directly. "Please just hear me out," she insisted. "I made some serious mistakes and I don't know what to do," she continued. Madison, I'm having brain surgery in 3 days, I said. I don't want to hear about your problems. Her concerned act dropped immediately and was replaced by the entitled attitude I remembered all too well from our breakup. Fine, but I'm in real trouble here, she said. That guy I was dating turned out to be married. His wife is trying to destroy my life. My friends convinced me to invest in some real estate deals that turned out to be completely fake. And now I owe almost $280,000. I just stared at her in complete disbelief. And you thought I'd care about this because, I asked. Because we were together for 6 years, she said desperately. Because you know me better than anyone. Because I lost my job and I can't make rent. And everyone I thought I could trust has completely disappeared. Sounds like you got exactly what you were looking for, I replied. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. You wanted to explore your potential, date more ambitious people, see what you were capable of achieving, I said. How's that working out for you? Madison's voice started rising, getting more desperate and aggressive by the second. I know I made mistakes, okay? I know I said things I shouldn't have said, she said, her voice getting louder. But I thought you'd be mature enough to help someone who needs it. Help with what? I asked. Cleaning up the mess you made by deciding I wasn't good enough for you? I pressed the call button for the nurse. Madison saw what I was doing and completely lost control of herself. You can't be serious right now, she said, her voice becoming shrill. I'm telling you I need help and you're calling security? Ma'am, you need to lower your voice, the nurse said firmly as she entered the room. This is ridiculous. We were engaged. We were going to get married, Madison said, her voice getting even louder. You can't just throw away 6 years because I made one mistake. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the room, the nurse said with authority. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway as Madison became increasingly hysterical. I still love you. I still care about you, she shouted. Everything I said was stupid, and I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Ma'am, we need you to come with us, one of the guards said firmly. You're making a huge mistake. I'm the best thing that ever happened to you, she yelled as they started escorting her out. You'll regret this. As security escorted her out of my room, she kept yelling down the hallway about how I was being unreasonable and how she was just trying to make things right between us. The nurse shook her head and asked if I was okay after witnessing that scene. Never been better, I told her honestly. Brandon showed up about an hour after the Madison incident, carrying coffee and wearing the expression of someone who had heard the whole story from the nurses in the hallway. I filled him in on Madison's surprise visit and her request for help with her problems. So, Brandon said when I finished telling him everything, she dates a married guy, gets scammed by her friends, loses her job, and then decides to come beg for help from the man she dumped for not being ambitious enough. That's like setting your house on fire and then asking the fire department for a loan. The surgery went perfectly. 8.5 hours in the operating room, but the surgeon achieved complete tumor removal with clean margins and no complications whatsoever. My recovery was textbook. 10 days in the hospital, then 6 weeks at my parents' house while I regained full strength and coordination. Brandon visited me almost daily during my recovery, bringing updates from work and increasingly ridiculous stories about what he had been telling people about my condition. I told your neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, that they had to replace part of your brain with a welding torch, he said during one visit. She believed it for about 30 seconds until I mentioned that the flame would interfere with your sleep. During my recovery period, I heard updates about Madison's situation through Sophia, Madison's little sister, who would visit occasionally to check on my progress. The full scope of Madison's poor decision-making was actually much worse than what she had admitted to me in the hospital. The married man she had been dating wasn't just cheating on his wife. He had been using Madison and several other women to help launder money through fraudulent real estate investments. His wife wasn't just angry about the affair. She was actively cooperating with federal investigators who were building a case against her husband's business activities. Madison wasn't just a victim of the real estate scam. She was potentially facing criminal charges as an unwitting accomplice in the scheme. The $280,000 debt was real, but she also owed significant back taxes on unreported income from the fake investments. The IRS had frozen her bank accounts while they investigated her level of involvement in the fraud. The salon had fired her not just because of the affair drama, but because they had discovered that she had been overcharging clients for services and pocketing the difference. Her fancy friends hadn't just disappeared when her money problems started. They had actively distanced themselves from her to avoid being associated with the criminal investigation. But here's the most satisfying part of the whole situation. Madison's parents refused to bail her out financially after learning about how she had treated me and hearing about her entitled hospital meltdown from Sophia. They decided that their daughter needed to face the consequences of her choices. Madison ended up having to declare bankruptcy and lost her apartment. She moved back in with a distant aunt in another state, but the criminal investigation followed her there. She was eventually charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, though she ultimately pled down to a misdemeanor charge with significant restitution requirements that would take years to pay off. By September, I was back to full-time work, including underwater contracts. The doctors had cleared me completely. No cognitive impairment, no motor coordination issues, and no restrictions on my activities whatsoever. It was like the surgery had never happened, except for a small scar that was barely visible under my hair. I found the engagement ring in my safe while I was organizing my equipment one day. I decided to sell it and put the money toward the down payment on a house. There was no point in keeping reminders of people who don't exist anymore. Brandon's prediction about Madison reaching out to me turned out to be accurate, though it took longer than the 3 months he had estimated. I got a text message from an unknown number in late October that simply said, "I'm sorry about everything. Hope you're doing well." I showed the message to Brandon, who just shook his head. "Too little, too late, and probably sent from jail," he said. By November, I had bought a house with decent workshop space and started taking on more underwater contracts. I was building a solid reputation in this specialized field, and my life was better than it had ever been before. Madison had wanted me to be more ambitious, reach my potential, and think bigger about the future. It turns out I was doing exactly that, just not with her dragging me down and constantly criticizing my choices. Sometimes people show you who they really are when they think they have better options available to them. Madison chose to chase fantasies and ended up with nothing. I chose to focus on real, achievable goals and built something lasting and meaningful. The best part is that I never had to compromise who I was as a person. I never had to pretend to be someone else, or apologize for doing honest work or enjoying simple pleasures. I found out that being authentic and reliable is worth more than all the superficial ambition in the world. Brandon summed it up perfectly during my housewarming party. "You dodged a bullet there, man," he said. "Could have been stuck paying for Madison's mistakes for the rest of your life. Instead, you gotta find out what you're really capable of without someone constantly telling you it's not enough." A year later, I'm making more money than Madison ever dreamed of, doing work that actually matters and makes a difference. I'm living in a house that I own outright, driving a truck that's completely paid off, and dating a woman who appreciates what I do instead of constantly trying to change me into someone else. Madison wanted a sophisticated lifestyle and an ambitious partner. She got fraud charges and bankruptcy instead. Sometimes life has a perfect sense of irony. The moral of this story is simple. Don't let anyone convince you that your honest work isn't good enough. Don't chase after people who think you need fixing or improvement. And definitely don't take relationship advice from people who measure success by how much money someone else spends on them. As for Madison, the last I heard, she was working retail in a small town, still paying restitution to the government, and still dealing with the consequences of her ambitious choices. Meanwhile, I'm 60 feet underwater fixing infrastructure that keeps society running and making more money in a weekend than she makes in a month. It's funny how things work out when you stay true to yourself and let other people chase their fantasies. I learned that the right person will appreciate you for who you are, not try to turn you into someone else. Madison taught me that lesson the hard way, but it was a lesson worth learning. Looking back, I'm actually grateful that everything happened the way it did. If Madison hadn't broken up with me, I might never have pushed myself to get the underwater welding certification. I might have stayed comfortable in my regular job and never discovered how much I was actually capable of achieving. The brain tumor was obviously terrifying, but even that experience taught me something valuable about what really matters in life. When you're facing serious surgery, you realize pretty quickly who your real friends are and what actually has value. Madison showing up at the hospital to ask for help with her problems told me everything I needed to know about her character. Now I'm in a relationship with someone who thinks my job is fascinating rather than embarrassing. She asks questions about my underwater projects and genuinely wants to understand the technical challenges I face. She's proud of what I do for a living, instead of suggesting ways I could be more ambitious. The difference is night and day. When you're with the right person, they don't make you feel like you need to apologize for who you are or what you do. They support your goals instead of trying to redirect them toward what they think would be more impressive. Madison is still out there somewhere, probably still convinced that she just made one mistake and that I was unreasonable for not helping her when she needed it. Some people never learn from their experiences, and that's not my problem anymore. What matters is that I learned from mine.